You're going to start noticing that these things behind me are going to get emptier because me and my wife made a pretty big decision. And so I'll talk about that another time. But anyway, today's devotion is on spiritual leadership of anointed men. And there's three topics here that are important for you to look into. It goes back into, like, I remember when I was a kid at my like really, really old church, Apostles Lutheran up in San Jose. We learned the acronym of JOY, which was Jesus, others, and yourself, and obviously it's joy. But you think of joy, you think of Jesus, others, and yourself, and that's the order that you put it in. Well, it's kind of crazy. Devotions actually kind of goes into that, and it's like God, the individual, and society. So Jesus, other, and yourself, and it's kind of cool. But there's something that you need to see, especially in today's time, about that, because the truth of what you are seeing happening within the Christian sphere, and then in society, secular society, is the negation of God, and then replacing God with society and with government. And what Christians who are being fooled right now by some of these, like, ethnic, social, economic, equity, all that stuff, these pushes, what's happening is these ideas are being kind of coated as being introductory means and measures to the gospel, when in reality you don't need to water down the gospel to get people to pay attention to your message via a social message and a social pull and push. Okay, so right now, when I see pastors who are doing all that they can to push all of these different narratives, and then they say, well, Jesus would be here, Jesus would do this. It's like, what they're actually saying is, I'm afraid to tell the gospel straight to people, and I need something to use as a crutch to get me to the gospel. So I'm afraid to confront individuals about sin. I'm afraid to have a discussion about what it truly looks like as a non-Christian going to hell. I am afraid to engage with individuals intellectually about the things in society that really do deal with sin, but it's easy for me to pinpoint everybody's a racist, all men are unequitable, that they should be taking a second step to women, that there's a real thing here dealing with LGBTQ that I just don't want to discuss, and I'm scared of discussing certain scriptures. And that's really what's happening. And the sad fact of it is, these people, the choice in that is to not be faithful. It's actually to be faithful to their own ideas and their man-centric and their egocentric means of believing, using, and then interacting with the world. If you truly want to see what that looks like, you can go into any one of these social justicians that mask themselves as pastors, and just see what their message actually is. I mean, you have white pastors who are apologizing for their being white, and then telling other white people that they need to do the same thing. It's a complete projection. Then you have the black pastors who are basically using their ethnicity as a hammer against every other individual out there that's not black. And then if they're black and they don't align themselves with this social justician pastor message, then they use their hammer, they use that message as a bludgeoning tool against individuals like myself or others who just speak out, just plainly saying, hey, you're not doing what you're saying you're supposed to be doing. So this is why it's important, when you read this devotion today, you realize that all of this social stuff, all this equitable stuff, even putting women in certain places within church leadership and all that, it's like all this egalitarian things have been elevated above what the true essence of the gospel actually is. If you really understand that, then you'll see why it is that when Paul says that there's no Jew or Gentile, slave or free, there's no men or women, that type of thing. You're still a man or woman, but according to God's grace, you are actually all made equal in Jesus, not made equal by a certain method put into the pulpit, a certain set of language that individuals will use to boost a certain message. Let's say for the LGBTQ message, or for black voices and all this, for all these different things. You wouldn't need that if you really believe the gospel. which actually kind of goes into, do these people actually believe in the gospel? And in my assertion, and really what I'm coming to is that I don't think that they do. I actually don't think that any of these people actually believe the gospel, because if they did, that they would understand what they're doing is antithetical to the gospel. So when you see this devotion today, put yourself into the place of looking at what it does mean to serve God. Okay, so first off, to serve God, then your society, and then to be who you're designed to be, you have to do what it says in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. Acknowledge the existence of God and know that God actually exists, that God actually designed this planet in this time for us. Like people from the 60s or the 50s or back in slave days, okay? So all of you people out there who want to go to a race narrative, go to the slave days. That was meant for them to live through, those people to live through. We don't have to replay all that to make things right now while those people are all dead. It's just like the whole logic and philosophy is just dumb. But that's what people do. And so what people do is they try to make themselves into their own God by making this time something else that this time wasn't meant for. Now they could try to say, well, these things happen, this things happen. Yeah, but they're not happening the same way that they were before. And the narratives that you're using are all anachronistic because you're trying to elevate your own intellectualism about those issues then. You didn't even live back then, so you couldn't even really give a real assessment of it. And as you assess it, you're judging other people while you leave yourself open to be judged. So when you understand who God is, you understand that individuals can't make themselves into God. Only God can be God. And so when you say, I am giving my life over to the Lord, you're giving it all over, whether it be your ethnicity, your gender, your sexuality, all that stuff. You're giving it all over to God. And you're saying, you control these things. The next thing is for society. And what people have done, like I said before, is they've replaced society, they've replaced God with society. And so they're doing all they can for society because that actually is their God, versus making God the ruler over all the stuff and actually going to him to actually work out the details. And so that's where you have the exchange. So when there's the self and there's society, there is no place for God, then these two things will always come into conflict, because you can't ever write these two things, the self and society, without God. You can't do that. And so there's a whole way here, and it's almost triune. It's almost trying to think through like what that looks like, because there really is a place here where the Spirit of the Lord works in through individuals to impact society. But if the spirit of man is working in the society of man, then there is no place for God there. And so everything will come out to be more disastrous than it actually turned out to be, than actually what it was playing out to be before, that this way was actually playing out in our society. So that's actually what's happening. And then you have the self. Okay, the self is truly like one of the greatest things that God's ever created. I mean, we think about what the Lord did in creating humans, male, and then pulling from the male, female, and that's what's actually happened in history. It's what happened for you and me, and that was through the first Adam and Eve. That's actually what took place. But people wanted to look at that as a myth. They want that's easier for somebody to say that's just a myth. It's not really true. When in reality, what they're really saying is, I can't see and I don't want to see that God actually created humans versus some primordial soup, some scientific method. In fact, you guys understand that the entire Big Bang isn't even scientific. It's not. Okay, so you can't use the scientific method on evolution. Okay, it's the weirdest thing to say you're scientific, but then to use a method that's not scientific. It's just weird. It's actually more of a religion than anything. So for we as individuals who want to follow after God, understand that you're following after the truth of God's creation of all things, and even of society. That society is falling apart because people negate God. And when people negate God, what they're doing is they're saying that they want to make themselves into God. That's basically what happens. When you push God out and you say that God doesn't belong here, that God has no place within society, that we don't need the Lord, then what you're saying is, I'm going to replace myself with that. And that's what happens. And then all things go to pot. Okay, because there's no real higher ethic here that involves a concrete text that hasn't changed for anything. That has been, I mean, they're still discovering things with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's actually this stuff is just real. So Whether or not people want to acknowledge it, that's their choice, and they'll have to deal with the consequences of unbelief later on. So, but you as an individual that wants to follow after the Lord, you have this stuff not only within the word that you hold at home, or in your phone or whatever. Which, by the way, make sure you get yourself a copy of the Bible that's off your phone. Make sure you do that. Okay, I'm just saying this just as foreshadowing. I'm just telling you to do that. But understand that there is a necessity here to go to something concrete versus people who sway with the times. They sway with culture. They sway with the wind. Okay, it talks about that in the Bible in James as well. So I want you to have this understanding that when you look at the word, at this message here today, that you're looking at God, society, and then people, yourself as an individual. And if you remove God from that, you have only this, and that's really man-centric. And you can even look at the numerology in that with what the 6 actually means. Okay, so hopefully that helps. And if you have any questions, just hit me up. Talk to you soon.